Okay, so imagine this. You're a town official, and a new law comes out that says you can give out bonuses.
Sounds great.
Right, but the money has to come from a specific fund,
Okay.
and that fund is almost empty already. So do you kind of push the limits to make your colleagues happy?
That's a really tricky situation.
Yeah.
It sounds like a recipe for trouble, for sure.
Yeah.
It highlights the constant tension, I think, between doing what's popular and doing what's right.
Exactly, and that's what landed a Philippine vice mayor in hot water.
Oh.
Are you ready to deep dive into a Supreme Court case that went viral? This one has got it all. Political drama, legal loopholes, and a hefty dose of what were they thinking?
Let's do it. I love these kind of cases where it starts small and then becomes this landmark decision.
Yeah, so we're taking you to the municipality of Vinzons in Camarines Norte, Philippines.
Okay.
We've got court documents, news articles, the whole shebang.
Awesome.
It all started in 2013 when the national government decided to boost local officials' allowances.
So we're talking about the representation and transportation allowances, the RATA.
Yes.
Meant to help officials cover costs, representing their constituents, getting around all the essential stuff.
Right, and it seems like a good thing, right? Giving these folks a little extra.
Yeah, for sure.
But here's the problem. The law said this increase could only be paid out if it didn't push spending on salaries past a certain limit. 45% of the local budget. Think of it like a credit card limit for the town.
A very important limit. That 45% rule is there to make sure that local governments have enough money for other essential services.
Right.
Like healthcare, education, infrastructure. You can't just spend it all on salaries.
You can't. And the mayor of Vinzons, Agnes Diz-Noang, was on top of it.
Okay.
She knew they couldn't afford the full rate increase for everyone because it would bust their budget.
Right.
So she approved a smaller bonus, keeping things within the limit.
Sounds sensible.
Yeah, very responsible leadership.
Absolutely. But as we often see in these stories, not everyone was on the same page.
Right. Enter our main character, the vice mayor, Radams Herrera.
Okay.
He decided to push for paying out the full rate increase, even though the mayor and some financial officers warned him it was against the rules.
Oh boy, this is where it gets interesting.
Yes.
The municipal accountant and the treasurer both raised red flags, refusing to sign the paperwork because they knew it was illegal. But Herrera insisted, even reportedly saying he'd take responsibility if the Commission on Audit found a problem.
Oh boy, that's some bold confidence right there.
It certainly is, and it speaks to a key element of this case, intent. Did Herrera knowingly break the rules, or did he genuinely believe he was acting in good faith?
Right.
That becomes a really crucial question later on.
So what happened next? Did the money actually get paid out?
Yes, it did. Despite the objections, Herrera ultimately signed the disbursement voucher himself, and the 4 former counselors received their rate of differential. But guess what?
Right.
The COA stepped in and said, nope, not allowed.
Oh, no.
They issued a notice of disallowance, forcing everyone to return the money.
Well, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, talk about a backfire.
What were the consequences for Herrera, though?
Well, it didn't end there. 3 residents of Vinzons weren't too happy about this whole situation.
Right.
And decided to file a complaint with the Office of the Ombudsman. They accused Herrera of grave misconduct and conduct prejudicial to the best interest of the service.
Ooh, those are serious charges.
They are.
What did the ombudsman decide?
So the ombudsman took these accusations very seriously and ultimately sided with the complainants. They found Herrera guilty on both counts and imposed the penalty of dismissal from service.
Wow.
This wasn't just a slap on the wrist either. The penalty included a bunch of additional consequences like being banned from holding public office and losing his retirement benefit.
That's a big price to pay.
Yeah, it is.
So what was Herrera's defense? Did he try to argue that it was just an honest mistake?
He did claim good faith, arguing that he believed the former counselors were entitled to the money. But the courts weren't convinced. They pointed out that he had been repeatedly warned about the illegality of the payment, but chose to push forward anyway.
So it sounds like the ombudsman's decision was the final word.
Not quite. Herrera appealed the decision to the Court of Appeals, hoping to overturn the ombudsman's ruling.
And did the Court of Appeals agree with him?
They did not. The Court of Appeals actually upheld the ombudsman's decision, emphasizing that Herrera had received multiple warnings about the payment's illegality, but proceeded anyway. They weren't buying his good faith argument.
Okay.
This is where things get really interesting because the case doesn't end there.
Wait, so it went even higher than the Court of Appeals? This ARADA bonus issue went all the way to the Supreme Court?
You got it. The case officially known as Herrera versus TiongcoG.R. No down 3, 11/20, January 15, 2020, landed in the Supreme Court of the Philippines. And it's not just about a local official and a questionable bonus anymore. This seemingly small-town dispute ends up having major consequences for Philippine law.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What happened at the Supreme Court? Did they overturn the lower court's decisions?
The Supreme Court did uphold Herrera's dismissal, but what's really fascinating is that they used this case as an opportunity to tackle a much larger legal issue, the condemnation doctrine.
Hold on, condemnation doctrine. I've never heard of that. What is it?
Imagine this. An elected official gets in trouble for something they did during their term, but if they win re-election, it's like a reset button.
Yeah.
All their past misdeeds are considered forgiven, wiped clean. That was the condemnation doctrine.
Wait, seriously? So you could break the law, get reelected, and just get away with it?
Yep, that was the idea. The logic was that voters knew about any wrongdoing and chose to forgive it by reelecting the official, but the Supreme Court in this case said, nope, not anymore.
What?
They argued that there's no legal basis for condemnation and that it actually undermines accountability in government.
Wow, that's a huge shift. So even though Herrera's case was about this rata bonus mess, it ended up changing the entire landscape of how we hold elected officials accountable in the Philippines.
Exactly. This seemingly minor case about a local bonus had far-reaching implications for the Philippine legal system. It's a perfect example of how a local issue can spark national change.
This is already so much more complex than I initially thought. So what happened to Herrera? Did he actually get away with it because of this condemnation doctrine?
Well, that's where the timeline gets a bit tricky, remember. Herrera's actions took place before the condemnation doctrine was abolished.
Right. But the Supreme Court ruled on his case after they abandoned the doctrine. So how did they apply the law in his case?
That's what we'll unpack in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we left off with the Supreme Court overturning this condemnation doctrine, but Herrera's case started before that change. So how did they handle that? Did he benefit from the old rules, or did they apply the new standard?
Yeah, it's a really interesting legal twist. What they did is they clarified that their decision to abolish the condemnation doctrine would only apply to cases from April 12, 2016 onward.
Okay.
That means any cases before that date would still be considered under the old condemnation doctrine.
Ah, so there's a cutoff date. It makes sense that they can't just change the rules for past cases, but doesn't that mean Herrera should have been in the clear? His actions happened before the cutoff, right?
You would think so, right? But here's the catch.
Okay.
Even though his case started before April 2016, he was reelected in May 2016 after the cutoff, so the Supreme Court decided that the condemnation doctrine didn't apply to him.
So even if the condemnation doctrine was still in effect, it wouldn't have saved him because of the timing of his reelection. It's fascinating how these legal details can make such a difference.
Absolutely. It really highlights the importance of precedent and how the legal system strives for consistency while also adapting to, these changing social norms.
So ultimately, the Supreme Court upheld Herrera's dismissal, but what was their reasoning? Was it purely based on this technicality with the condemnation doctrine, or did they find his actions themselves to be wrong?
Yeah. Their decision wasn't solely based on the condemnation doctrine. They actually went into detail about why they found Herrera guilty of grave misconduct and conduct prejudicial to the best interests of the service.
So they addressed the original charges directly.
Right.
What did they say?
So they looked at all the evidence and concluded that Herrera knew the RO increase was illegal. They pointed out that he'd received numerous warnings from financial officials who refused to sign off on the payments.
Yeah.
Essentially, the Supreme Court said he ignored expert advice and chose to break the rules anyway.
So it wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. They sounds like they found his actions to be intentional.
Exactly. The court emphasized that his actions damaged the reputation of his office and undermined public trust. They argued that public officials have a duty to uphold the law, and by choosing to prioritize the bonus payments over clear legal guidelines, he failed in that duty.
It's interesting that this whole case revolves around what seems like a relatively small amount of money. It wasn't millions of pesos or some grand scheme, but the principle of the matter, disregard for the law and financial rules, is what led to his downfall.
Yeah, that's a crucial takeaway from this case. It reinforces the idea that no one is above the law regardless of their position or the amount of money involved. Even seemingly small acts of misconduct can have serious consequences, especially for public officials entrusted with taxpayer money.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening. We started with a local budget battle and ended up exploring a major shift in Philippine law. It's amazing how these hyper-local cases can have such significant national implications.
It really underscores the importance of transparency and accountability in government, no matter how small the scale might seem.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with some important questions to consider, like how can we create a culture of accountability where officials are truly held responsible for their actions? How do we make sure good intentions don't lead to breaking the law?
Those are great questions. I think those are questions that go beyond this particular case and touch upon the very foundation of good governance. We need to think about how we can encourage ethical decision making and make sure that our systems of checks and balances are working effectively.
Yeah, this case also shows the power of ordinary citizens. It was three residents of Inzans who filed the initial complaint against Herrera.
Right.
They saw something they felt was wrong and took action.
That's a great point. It highlights the importance of civic engagement and speaking up when you see something that seems unjust or illegal.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in holding our leaders accountable. We can't just sit back and assume someone else will take care of it. We need to stay informed and engaged in the political process, whether it's by attending local council meetings, asking questions, or even just talking to our friends and neighbors about these issues.
I agree. We can't be complacent when it comes to good governance. The decisions made at all levels of government have a direct impact on our lives, and it's up to us to make sure those decisions are made with integrity and transparency.
Well said. This case is a reminder that every peso counts, and that even seemingly small acts of financial misconduct can have a ripple effect. It also reminds us that the law is constantly evolving and that court decisions can have a lasting impact on our society.
Absolutely. This isn't just a legal story. It's a story about accountability, responsibility, and the power of individual action.
So this Herrera versus Mago case has been a wild ride, right? We started with a question about local bonuses and ended up deep in Philippine law.
I know. It's crazy.
It's amazing how one seemingly small town dispute can lead to such big, legal changes.
It really is. It highlights the interconnectedness of our legal and political systems. What might appear to be a minor financial infraction at the local level can ripple outward, ultimately impacting how we understand accountability and good governance on a national scale.
Yeah, and this case wasn't just about legal technicalities, right? The court really seemed to grapple with the ethical implications of Herrera's actions, even though the amount of money was relatively small.
Yeah, absolutely. The Supreme Court really emphasized that public officials have a special duty to act with integrity and uphold the law. They made it clear that Herrera's disregard for financial regulations and repeated warnings from experts demonstrated a lack of judgment and responsibility regardless of the amount of money involved.
Yeah, it makes you think about the broader implications for other officials, right? If a vice mayor can lose his job over a bonus payment, it sets a precedent for holding others accountable for their financial decisions, no matter how small they might seem.
Exactly. That's a key takeaway, I think, for anyone in a position of authority, whether it's in government, business, or even just a local community organization. Financial transparency and ethical conduct are essential, and there can be serious consequences for failing to uphold those standards.
So what's the biggest takeaway you think our listeners should walk away with from this deep dive?
For me, it's the understanding that no one is above the law and that even seemingly minor financial misconduct can have significant repercussions. This Herrera versus Mago case is a powerful reminder that we must hold ourselves and our leaders accountable for their actions and that integrity and transparency are essential for a just and equitable society.
Absolutely. And it's a call to action for all of us to stay informed and engaged in the political process at all levels.
Yeah.
Whether it's paying attention to local budget decisions, questioning candidates about their financial practices, or even just talking to our friends and neighbors about the importance of ethical leadership.
I agree. We can't afford to be passive observers. The decisions made by our leaders have a direct impact on our lives, and it's up to us to ensure those decisions are made with integrity and transparency.
This deep dive has been a fascinating journey through the complexities of Philippine law, ethical leadership, and the power of individual action. It's a reminder that every decision matters, and that even small acts of misconduct can have far-reaching consequences.
It also underscores the importance of an independent judiciary and a robust legal system that can adapt to changing societal values. The abolishment of the condemnation doctrine is a testament to the evolving nature of Philippine law and the ongoing pursuit of a more just and accountable society.
Well said. So to our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring these issues, read more about the Herrera versus Mago case, research the condemnation doctrine and its impact on Philippine law, and consider how these concepts apply to your own lives and communities.
Yeah, remember, knowledge is power. And by staying informed and engaged, we can all contribute to a more just and equitable world.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Herrera versus Mago case. We hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to stay informed and engaged in the ongoing quest for good governance and accountability.
Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.
This is The Deep Dive signing off.